With all the theories of the rapture as it relates to the tribulation period, that's Daniel's 7-year tribulation, found in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27. Out of all the theories that are out there, the pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, and pre-wrath, all of them generally agree that the tribulation period, that Daniel's 7-year tribulation period, ends in Revelations 19 when Jesus comes back at the second coming of Christ. If that's the case, all we need to do is go backwards from Revelations 19, identify the time periods that we know of, and see if there are other references that will identify a 7-year tribulation period as found in Daniel chapter 9. And as it turns out, if we start in Revelations 19 and we go backwards, the next thing that we know about the time period of the tribulation is that the Antichrist rules and reigns for 42 months. Well, if he rules and reigns for 42 months, and Revelations 19 is when he is destroyed, that makes the revelation of the Antichrist a mid-7-year tribulation event. That is found in Revelations 13. Revelations 13 is when the beast comes up from the sea, and then the devil gives him his power, his throne, and his ability to rule. And then Revelations 13:5 says that the beast was giving a mouth speaking proud words and blasphemies, and he was permitted to exercise ruling authority for 42 months. So there we have Revelations 19, the end of the tribulation period. Revelations 13 is where the beast, the Antichrist, comes to power, the midpoint of the tribulation. And as we continue to go backwards, looking for 3.5-year time periods, we find one in Revelations 12:14. Now this is Revelations 12 is the revelation of the woman. The first 6 verses talk about the woman who's representative of Israel. That's a sign that she's struggling to give birth. And then the second sign in that first 6 verses is the red dragon who's trying to devour this child once it's born. Revelations 12:6 says the woman was given the ability to flee into the wilderness for 1,260 days. And then we go down to Revelations 12:14. This is where the devil is now chasing after the woman, trying to kill her. And she's given the wings of a giant eagle to fly off into the wilderness 4 times time and half a time, which is the equivalent of 3.5 years. And while that revelation is made in 12:14 about the woman having this authority to flee into the wilderness, it doesn't actually happen until 12:17. The devil goes after the woman in 12:14, 15, 16, and 17. And then because he can't kill her, she flees into the wilderness, and then the devil goes after the rest of her children, which are those that hold to the testimony of Jesus and keep the commandments of God. Those are messianic believers. But since the revelation of this time period at the end of Revelation 12 coincides with the beast coming to power in Revelations 13. So those two time periods overlap. The time period in 12:6 of Revelation also overlaps with 12:14. They're referring to the same event. So we're still at the midpoint of the tribulation period, but we need another 3.5-year period to get the beginning of the tribulation period. And that can be found in Revelations 11, verses 2 and verses 3. Now, in Revelation 11, John's given a measuring rod and told to measure the temple, the altar, and those that worship there, but leave out the courtyard. It's been given to the Gentiles. They'll trample on the holy city for 42 months. And then I will give my witnesses the authority or the ability or the power to prophesy for 1,260 days. Well, those two time periods, 11:2 and 11:3, 11:2 being the 42 months the Gentiles are trampling on the holy city, and 11:3 being the 1,260 days the two prophets prophesied, they clearly overlap each other. But now we have these two references happening before the events in Revelations 12 and Revelations 13. So here we have the beginning of the tribulation period. Now, after this 1,260-day prophetic event that these two prophets are prophesying, they're eventually killed by the beast that comes up from the abyss. Their bodies lay on the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 days, and then all of a sudden their bodies come to life. They stand up, and there's a voice in heaven that says, "Come up here." That is not the rapture for the mid-tribulation. And the reason it's not is because there are still a couple of events that happen after that voice says, "Come up here." And one of those things is a giant earthquake in Jerusalem, potentially in the entire area. But it says that 7,000 people are killed and 1/10 of the city is destroyed. But the very next thing that happens is the most critical part to understanding the mid-tribulation rapture and the entire concept of the seven-year tribulation period. The next event that happens is in 11:15 of the book of Revelations, and it says the trumpet sounds. There's a seventh trumpet sounds in 11:15 of Revelation. And when that happens, there are voices in heaven that says, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. So we have clearly identified the beginning of a 7-year tribulation period in Revelations 11:2 and 11:3. We've clearly identified a midpoint where the seventh trumpet sounds. That's also something that coincides with the events of Revelations chapter 12. Revelations chapter 13 is where the Antichrist comes to power, and he rules for 42 months, 3.5 years. That's also a mid-tribulation event. You have now the entire 7-year tribulation period being outlined from 11 to Revelations 13.